Okay? Evening, everybody. We're starting tonight, Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18. Bia Midas HaChasidus. Chasidut. I think we said it several times before, but it bears repeating. When we talk about Chasidut, we're not talking about the movement started by the Baal Shem Tov. We're talking about the Midah of Chasidut, which goes all the way back. And basically, the Mesilas is divided into two sections. One is tzidkus, which is basically a person to be a tzaddik has to do everything it says in the Shulchan Aruch. And then Chasidut, which means going beyond the letter of the law, or lifnim mishur sadin, as we say in Hebrew. So, the previous weeks we've been talking about tahara, purity, and now we're going to move on to Chasidut. He translates it here as saintliness. I don't know, the word saint always conjures up sort of pictures from inside a cathedral for me, so I'd rather just call it Chasidut. If you remember right at the beginning of the Sefer, we talked about the two midot. The two first midot we talked about were zihirut and zrizut. Zihirut, which basically means watchfulness, being careful not to transgress the negative mitzvahs of the Torah, and zrizut means alacrity, which means going forward, going ahead, and being alacritous to fulfill the positive mitzvahs of the Torah. We've seen the structure of the book is really to discuss the same basic dichotomy, the two sides, the sur meira and the aseh tov, the turn aside from evil and do good, as they progress on higher and higher levels. But that's basically the structure of the book. It deals, until later on anyway, it deals with these two sides of human nature, the two sides of the Torah, what you're not allowed to do and what you're, yes, supposed to do. And we're moving the bar up, so to speak, every time. So we talked about tahara, which is the equivalent of zihirut in tzidkut, now moves up into tahara in chasidut. And chasidut, basically, even though that's a general term for the whole second half of the book, it really means the equivalent of zrizut, of alacrity, doing the positive mitzvahs in the absolutely best possible way, as we saw before. And now we're going to add another level to this tonight. So first of all, he starts off with a caveat. He says, basically what he says is that Chasidut has got a bad name, in his time anyway. And I think maybe the same would be true nowadays. You know, when you see somebody flailing around and davening a Shmona Esrei for 25 minutes, now I'm not saying there aren't people who daven for longer than 25 minutes, and these people are great tzaddikim. But sometimes people mistake quantity for quality. Sometimes a person has the outside trappings of Chasidut, of wanting to be on this level of being a chassid, to be a saint, so to speak. And he says that this trait of Chasidut requires explanation, clarification, because there are many customs and practices which pass as saintliness, which are nothing to do at all with it. They're just the shells, the klipa, the outward manifestations of behaving, like acting, playing the part, so to speak. But it's not really coming from inside. And they want a real center to them. And he says it comes actually from a lack of real thought about what Chasidut really is. It's like grabbing the externals and failing to understand that it's something that comes from inside, and understanding the depth of really what it is that Chasidus is. So, and of course, unfortunately, this is very often true. Part of one's failings as a person can often come from superficiality, the desire to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk without thinking the thoughts and doing your homework. And that's what he's talking about here. A lot of people who sort of are tofes, grab onto the exterior, the outside customs and practices and behavior of Chasidus, really are just looking at it from the outside, and it looks cool. So let's do that, and that's, it's of course it's much easier to do. It's much easier to just get the right hat and get the right tzitzis, the long tzitzis or whatever, and the long coat or whatever it is, and hey, we're there, right? No, you're not there. So, without exerting, as he says, and really being toiling to understand what is the Derech Hashem, what does Hashem really want from me, and he's going to come back to this clear, rational understanding. Chassidut has to be novea, it has to flow from wisdom. It's not something which flies in the face of reason. And so a person who's not prepared to put the effort in, and wants to be a dilettante, he just wants to, flirt with the exterior of things, he won't put in the not necessary effort to know the Derech Hashem with a clear and rational knowledge, as I said. So then, whatever comes to hand that looks cool, that looks holy, that looks frum, they grab onto that. And in point of fact, it's really not Chassidus at all. And it's because of this, he says, that Chassidus has got a bad rap. It's got a bad name. In other words, when people see somebody who's really just phoning it in, it's not coming from inside. So they assume that is what Chassidus is. So it gives a bad name to the idea of Chassidus in general. And especially the more perceptive and more intelligent a person is, the more he will be put off by what he sees clearly to be just superficiality. Because these sort of pseudo-Chassidim, so to speak, give the impression that being a Chassid is something which is counter to logic. And people tend to believe that to be a Chassid you have to spend hours and hours every day saying Tehillim. Now, again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't say Tehillim. But when things become exaggerated, when they spend lots of time saying lengthy confessions, viduyim, or even more so, exaggerating wailings like krichsing when they're davening and flailing their arms around and bowing, or he even goes so far as to say flagellations or immersing them. I don't think flagellation is the right word. Tzigufei guf really means mortification of the flesh. It's like a Christian idea. Well, the Christians got it from us. And he's going to, one thing at a time, but basically when people get into this idea that you have to immerse yourself in ice and roll around in the snow and deprive yourself and fly in the face of reason as to what is a healthy and appropriate way for a person to believe, this gives Chassidus a bad name. And now it could be, it has to be parenthetically, for people on a very high level, there's certain degrees of mortification, certain degrees of fasting, above and beyond what normally people do. It's appropriate if you're on that level. But you can't fool yourself. As they say, you can fool most of the people most of the time, but you can't fool everybody all the time. You can always fool yourself. But basically, a person who thinks that Chassidus means he has to... I'll give you an example. There's a very holy person that I have the privilege to have learned with. I'm not going to say his name. He's a rabbi, he's a mukubal, he's a real mukubal. He's not one of these fake babas who charge you a fortune in order for them to do some kind of thing that's got nothing based on reason. Somebody who's never spent their time learning Shas and Poskim. This is a person who is a Talmid Chacham Gadol. And there's such a concept, I remember him telling us once, of a fast which lasts for 3 days. From what I remember, I think it's 3 days. I could be wrong. It was a very long fast. And you break it with Kiddush on Shabbos by night. Like a very extreme thing, which I hadn't even heard of up till this point. It's not very well known. It's something that people on a very high level may do in order to achieve a certain purification, a certain level of Kedusha. And he was saying that, I don't remember his exact words, but he was saying that a person shouldn't do it. I'm not sure who said the word was quite like, because it's not a good idea, but it was clear to me that in order to say that you shouldn't do it, he knew what it was. So, okay, there are people, I'm just bringing this example to tell you there are people who do things, but I promise you, people like that do them very secretively. And if you know about it, then it probably means that this person is not, it's showing off, it's superficial. Okay, so that's his caveat, so to speak, when he's talking about, yes?
So, if Mesilat Yesharim exists, why are there still so many Hasidim of that kind? Like, did they ever not read Mesilat Yesharim?
Well, that's why there's so many people who just phoning it in, because that's human nature is that, a person can sometimes think, well, that's cool, that's good, without really, understanding that it don't come easy. What you work for, you get, and what you don't work for, you can't just, wear the T-shirt and hey, I arrived. I mean, it's a very tempting thing because, first of all, most of us love laziness of one kind or another. The nature of a human being is to take a shortcut whenever he can. I mean, until, of course, he stops himself and says, this is not going to get me where I get to, but being lazy is part of human nature. Adam and Offer, we're built from earth, and the nature of earth and dirt and dust is to sink downward. That's what the body's made from. Adam and Offer. Hashem created us from dust, and so our nature pulls us down, not to want to work hard. We've talked about this at the beginning of the book. So, it's like, it's much easier. So you ask me why there's so many people who still do this, because I think that's human nature. Okay, so as he said, even though this kind of behavior, these kind of, I don't want to say extreme, but let's say very stringent, let's say fasts or disciplines, which could be appropriate to a very select group of people, but unfortunately this has got a bad name because people basically adopt these practices without really understanding, or as they say, they're not holding by that. Yeah.
When can inflicting injury on yourself ever be appropriate? I mean,
No, not inflicting injury. I'm not talking about that. He says flagellation in the translation. I don't think that's a good translation. I'm sure if I look in the Hebrew, it'll say something like sigufei aguf, which means great bowings. Yeah, uva sigufim. Sigufim means basically afflicting the body. But it doesn't mean, it means, for example, like, I don't know, if you stay up without sleep and learn all night.
Right, so that seems very kind of antithetical to what Judaism is.
Well, that's what he's saying. He's saying
several forbidden, you're forbidden to fast above certain limits.
You're right that for most people these things are not appropriate. But there are people who, for example, he talks here about Bali Tshuva, and I'm scared to use the word Bali Tshuva because then Bali Tshuva in our day and age means something completely different to what it meant in the day of the Ramchal. But somebody who did something which was seriously wrong, and under the instruction and the supervision of his Rabbi and his friends, and it could be that he might do something which requires to go a little bit beyond what would a normal people would need to do in order to do a tikkun to fix this particular chet. But again, all of these things are appropriate. That we're talking about somebody who was probably on a high level to begin with, who fell. And so somebody on that level, but somebody who comes into Ohr Somayach and starts, I don't know, fasting for 48 hours, somebody should tap him on the shoulder and say, I don't think you got it right. This is not for us. There's somebody once said, the idea of tshuva is we start off with sur meira v'aseh tov. You start off with withdrawing, separating yourself from evil, and then only afterwards you do the good, as the structure of this book is basically, which is zihirus and then zrizus. Withdraw from doing the bad stuff and then do the good stuff. So, but you see clearly here in Ohr Somayach, it's not like that. Because what's the first thing they do when you come in here? They sit you down with the Gemara, the Aseh Tov. The thing is that basically in our generation, it could well be that if somebody walks in off the street and says, okay, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do that, you're not going to be able to even start with them. So maybe in our generation the idea is you have to show somebody the beauty of Torah, and the Torah itself, the Tov, which is will return them lemutav, will bring them close to want to be, even to get into the mindset of Somayach. But again, all of this he's talking for his generation. When we talk about people who fast, or maybe, I don't know, he talks about, I'm scared to say it, like whatever it is, mortification is like, it does have a place. It does, and mortification is also a very strong word, like restricting yourself in maybe a way which is a little more than normal people might do. It has a place, but you have to know for sure that you're on that level, and this is not just something that you're, doing to kind of, like they have. I saw this crazy thing in the paper that these people, what do? They go on these long international travel aircraft things. Have you seen this without eating anything or without talking to anybody? It's like some kind of new craze. You heard about this thing? So I saw there's some kind of craze that they, can you travel, like, I don't know, without getting up from your seat, or, so that's an idea, like, just, like, to be cool, do something extreme. There is a part of a person that wants to be extreme because it makes him feel like, hey, I've got super control over here, and I think the idea is they don't eat anything, they don't order a drink, they don't talk to anybody. I mean, and it's just like, they sit in their seat, for 8 hours, and that's like. So I'm saying, you see, there is an attraction to that kind of meshuggah behavior, and that's what he's warning against. It has to come from an idea. This is something that I need to do. This is something that Hashem wants me to do. This is something that maybe I've, spoken to my Rabbi about this. That maybe I should. I don't know. On our level, maybe it means that instead of having 2 spoonfuls of cholent on Shabbos, Shabbos is another matter anyway. But there. I'm joking, but I'm saying there are things that maybe for people on a certain level. Anyway, enough on this. So, as he says, that the fact of the matter is that really a grasp of Chassidus requires a tremendous degree of intellectual understanding. What he's been talking up to now is that people reject the logical and the intellectual, and they favor these extreme behaviors which fly in the face of reason. So it's really the other way around. Because it rests, this idea of Chassidus rests on a foundation of higher wisdom and a perfection of one's actions so complete that is the goal for anybody who has Chochmas Alev, who's wise of heart. And it's only those people who are truly wise who can really acquire this level of Chassidus. That's what Chassidus is a level of wisdom and a level of purity of heart. It's nothing to do with all these extreme behaviors. As it says, V'lo am ha'aretz chasid. An am ha'aretz, literally somebody who is unlearned, somebody who can't learn, who hasn't learned, who doesn't know the mitzvahs very, very well, who hasn't studied in great depth, he cannot become a chassid. Again, the mere sort of externals don't make you a chassid. Now, he's now going to talk about the idea of chassidus in an ordered sequence. As we said before, the idea of chassidus is really the higher level, going back to the beginning of the book, of zrizas, of doing things, mitzvahs, with alacrity. He's taking it one step further now, and he says that the underlying idea is that you take a mitzvah which is binding on all Klal Yisrael, and because of your love for Hashem, you will not only endeavor to fulfill the obligation by means of the duty that you have to, like everybody else, but he gives a mashal here of a son who loves his father. If the father, let's say, hints that he likes cheesecake, let's take a simple example. He just mentions by the by he likes cheesecake. So a son who loves his father, and he knows that in Haifa There's this cheesecake shop where they make the best cheesecake in the world. So he'll get on a train and go to Haifa and bring the cheesecake for his father. That's the idea he wants to point out here. That there's an idea that true Hasidus is this taking the mitzvahs and extrapolating. Now, I'm going to come back to this because you have to be careful. And extrapolating that mitzvah because Hashem has showed me by way of giving me this mitzvah so I understand, I can intuit, I can broaden that because I love Hashem, to expand that to understand what it is that Hashem, so to speak, wants in that mitzvah. And I can enlarge it, and I can beautify it, and I can, because of my love for Hashem, do much more. Again, there's a caveat here. There's an Isser in the Torah called Baal Tosif. Baal Tosif means you're not allowed to sit in the sukkah for 8 days. You're not allowed to have 8 minim you're not allowed to... anytime there's a mitzvah aseh where there's a certain, boundary, so you can't go outside the physical boundaries. But what you can do is take that mitzvah and staying within the parameters as laid down by the Torah, you can expand it, you can expand your, and he's going to talk about this, your premeditation in it, you can expand the Hidur mitzvah, all basis on this idea which is Chasidus, which is because Hashem has showed me so much, showed me in this mitzvah a certain way, kavayachol, that he wants, so to speak. So now, because I love Hashem, so I can expand that. I can figure out what it is that I can expand it within its parameters. Yeah. That's what he says here. Yeah. He says here also that if the mere hint, so to speak, like taking the idea of the father again, a mere hint from the father will be enough for a person to understand, and even though it wasn't expressly stated, the intention is clear. Basically, this is the important thing. This is an expression of love. When a person loves his father, loves his mother, loves his sister, his brother, his wife, he loves his friend. So a person is attuned to wanting to make that relationship more and more special by doing something that he knows that the other partner will be happy. Now, Kaviyachal, we can't talk about Hashem being happy in quotes, but that's in terms of mashalim, in terms of parables, that is how we understand our relationship with Hashem. That this love affair that I have with Hashem, because I love Hashem, so I want to do everything I can to fulfill His will. And, somebody who is in love, somebody who has a love for his brother, his sisters, whatever it is, his wife. So he's not going to say, well, that's all that, come back to the father. My father said this, so that's all I'm going to do. No, a person, if you really love somebody, you want to take it as far as you can. You attempt to analyze Hashem's mitzvahs and to arrive at the intention of the person who commanded us and understand what it is that's going to give him pleasure. Now, of course, that's all in the realm of human beings. But that's the mashal, that's the parable in our world to understand what the idea of Chassidus is. And of course, the idea is that the mitzvahs that Hashem has already given us are clear. Everybody knows what they are. And they serve as an indication, as a guide. And a person who desires to serve Hashem because he loves Hashem won't say, well, whatever is written, whatever Hashem, what it says in the Shulchan Aruch, that's it. And well, I did what I have to do. I did what I have to do. I don't have to do more than that. Punkt verkehrt. The opposite. Hafuch. He'll say, since I've seen that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he wants a certain way of behavior. He wants me to behave with charity to people, to give tzedakah. So he'll find all kinds of different ways of giving tzedakah, better ways of giving tzedakah in ways that is not going to be nobody's going to know who it comes from. Kindness, all kinds of kindness, that because He knows that Hashem wants us to be ma'atu chesed, that He does chesed, so He wants us to be mit chesed, to do kindness. So a person, when he thinks about these things, he'll see that all many different ways of being able to be kind. A simple word, a smile, giving somebody a ride. If a person is focused on, I want to do what Hashem wants me to do, and he goes through his day thinking like that, and every mitzvah that he does, he intuits and he extrapolates and he thinks about that mitzvah and what is this mitzvah that I'm doing now. Of course, ben adam lechaveiro, it becomes much easier. There's a much bigger scope. As I said, there's a physical limitation in terms of, say, tefillin. You can't make tefillin with 5 batim in them, 5 parchments in them. But that's not the point. The point is you could certainly maybe spend a little bit more, or maybe even a lot more money on the best tefillin you can possibly get. Okay, this is the person who does this is considered to be somebody who's aseh nachas ruach liyotzro. He gives nachas ruach. He gives nachas to Kodesh Baruch Hu. He sums up. So therefore, Chassidus is the comprehensive performance of all the mitzvahs, embracing all the relevant areas and all the tanaim, all the conditions, all the pratim, the details and the details of the details in every way which is possible. And this going beyond that to extrapolate that seeing as we said, to take it further, to be creative in one's avodas Hashem. So he says at the end here of this chapter what I said to you at the beginning, which is basically that Chassidus is a kind, is the flip side, so to speak, of precious. In other words, precious, as we spoke about before, is separating oneself from negative things, and even things that are not in themselves negative. Sorry, I take that back. Precious is separating yourself from something which, while it might be mutter, could lead, chas v'chalila, to something which is not. This is, it all goes back to the idea of zehirus, but zehirus transmits on a higher level to precious, separating oneself from that which is mutter, because the very nature of its physicality tends to bring one to a lower level. And above that now is the level of Chassidus. That's what he says. Chassidus is basically the idea of precious, but it's... I'm sorry, I said this wrong. Let me go back here. Sorry, I messed it up. Etch a sketch. So, yeah. So basically, Chassidus and precious are on the same level. But Chassidus is the aseh tov, is the positive, and precious is the sur meira, separating from doing bad. And as we said before, those basically go back to the beginning of the book with the basic divisions of Zehirus and Zrizus. So on this higher level now, we've got this idea that Chassidus is to do with the positive mitzvahs, adding to that which has been explicitly said, but of course not in a way which is Baal Tosif. Giving pleasure to Hashem. And this is the true definition of what Chassidus is, and not to do with extreme behaviors which really have no place in logic and is not what Hashem wants at all. Any questions? Yeah.
Doesn't this risk creating a gap between people who practice Judaism in one way and Hasidut, meaning, if you see people practicing the same religion as you do, but strangely, isn't it going to cause a little bit of a
Okay, so the question is, I don't know if it picked up on the microphone, that is, if people are going to conduct themselves in this manner, then is it going to look strange to people who are conducting Judaism on a...
Does risk
Yeah.
creating some alienation.
Doesn't that risk creating alienation? Well, the answer to that is that you would have no idea that somebody is exercising Hasidus. You wouldn't see it. You wouldn't know it. Maybe if you look very carefully and you spend a lot of time around this person, you'd notice. But anybody who's on this level will keep it very carefully covered up. You're not gonna see these things. Again, a lot of it is internal. A lot of it is intention, kavanah, and anybody who, so to speak, lets his Hasidus hang out at the side like his shirt tails, is basically, that's already lacking. That's not really Hasidus. Anybody, I'm sure, I think if I have to say, of all the great rabbis that I've had the privilege to meet, all the any Odom Godel, they're all very, very different. But one thing I think they all share in common, two things I would say they share in common. One is they all seem incredibly normal, to the extent that they kind of redefine what normality is. And sort of next to them, everybody else seems not quite 100% normal. Any Gadol I ever met I never had the feeling this was an extreme person. The other way around. He was extremely normal, but in a way which was kind of totally right on. That's the way a human being should be. The other thing I would say, just to finish off, is anytime I had the schus to be in the presence of an Odom Godel, I went to go to him to ask for an eitzah, was that I felt for the time that I was there, that I was really the only thing that was really important to him at that moment. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of people who come through, and a big rabbi is probably surrounded by many, I'm sure, one after the next, but it was that ability, not genuinely to feel that all that's important right now is me. Anyway, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll carry on next week. Any other questions? We're good? Okay, thanks a lot.